Welcome back. Well, with hours left till election day, we take a look at the latest data released by Ipsos in conjunction with eNCA. So the findings reveal the uncertainty and frustrations of South Africans ahead of the local government elections. We are joined right now by Mari Harris from Ipsos to unpack more on the election scenarios and outcomes ahead of the polls. Mari, always a pleasure to have you. I think the one thing that caught my attention was how a lot of the voters make their decisions when they get to the booth about which political party to vote for. When I saw this, I kept thinking, then what is the point of all of this campaigning and electioneering if I'm going to make my decision whether or not I've got my red pen or my black pen, which political party I'm going to vote for at the booth? Fascinating.
It is absolutely fascinating, but it is typical of an election like this one, where there's so much uncertainty and people do not know who to vote for. And they say parties do not keep their promises.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that a little bit later. But they also say, what's the point of voting? Yes, I'm going to vote, but I don't know exactly who I will vote for. It's probably the question I had to answer most in the last 2 weeks. Who should I vote for? So I think it is a general thing around the country at the moment, which party will really make a difference at the local government level. And I can quite understand, but people think and look at all the campaigns and look at the speeches and look at the manifestos, some people do, and then they make their decision right at the polling station.
It certainly is an interesting time, and what is also another interesting, before we go into just some of the findings that have been picked up of late, is how a lot of times the women that are voting more than men. Now, under normal circumstances, you would always hear men being more vocal about the political discourse. They're the ones marching in and, you know, in the front of the charge. But when it comes to actually placing your X on the ballot paper, women are at the forefront of this. How come?
Women are just, I think they go about it more quietly than men. Women are not necessarily anarchistic. They won't necessarily march unless they really support an idea or an issue, then they will march. But they are not that expressive about their politics. And I think it has to do with our paternalistic system, because so many times women are not really allowed to make up their own minds. They get told, and women are saying, no, nonsense with this. We will make up our own minds. And if you look at the IC figures, you will see that there's more than 2 million more women registered than what men are registered. So yes, men might make a bigger noise about it, but in the end women vote. And they vote for the same things, but they also vote for different things. Because if you ask women why would they vote, why do they want to vote, they will always tell you it's for the future, it's for the youth, it's for the children.
Gotcha.
And for men, that's not the first reason.
Oh, so they're not futuristic in their thoughts?
I wouldn't put it that blatantly, but I think they have other priorities. A lot of them look at opportunities and those sorts of things, and it's not the issue of men and women necessarily, but there are some differences when it comes to voting and for reasoning for voting.
Well, let's take a look at the latest data that has come out. I think it's very interesting. We've got some possible scenarios that have been painted for November 1st, just showing the different political parties, ACDP, Action SA. We've also got the ANC, DA, EFF, IFP, and Freedom Front Plus, which I know that will appear on our screen in just a moment. And looking at these possible scenarios around, you know, those that have registered to vote, those that want to vote, you know, and also which political party is likely to be the party of choice. Just take us through some of those findings as we've been seeing.
I just want to say these are national results.
Yeah.
So I took all the parties that score more than 0.5% on a national ballot. If I look at the ballots coming out. So there might be a few more, but at the moment these are the only parties that had more than 0.5%.
So these are the possible scenarios for the 1st of November 2021.
2021.
Yes, with the political parties.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, first of all, we know that there are 26.2 million voters registered to vote. We know all of them are not going to vote. About 30% tell you that they will not vote or they don't want to vote and those sorts of things. So we put all the answers that they give us to different questions almost like in a melting pot. And based on the answers they give, we work out scenarios for voting. a medium voter turnout scenario, a high voter turnout scenario, and a low voter turnout scenario. But these scenarios are not linear. It doesn't mean that if you win 1 percentage point with a medium voter turnout, you will win 2 with a high voter turnout.
Gotcha, yeah.
Influences the different parties differently because we work with people and different voters from different parties react differently. So I had to say that up front because it looks rather strange if you look at some of these things. For the high voter turnout, and I don't think we're going to have a low voter turnout. If we look at high and medium voter turnout, the ANC gets 38.5 for the high voter turnout and 46.5% on a national basis for the medium voter turnout.
Sure.
Then the big influence on the DA for a high voter turnout is they get 31.5. The reason is if that is just more possible and more DA voters are saying they will go to the polls under a high voter turnout scenario. Obviously, we don't put it to them as a high scenario and a low scenario. We ask different questions to get to these answers. And for the IFP, it's around 13-14% for the EFF coming out of the high and medium voter turnout scenarios. We also see that the IFP benefits from a medium voter turnout scenario, as well as the Freedom Front, who benefits from a low voter turnout scenario, which sounds very strange. But then if we look at other things coming into play on voting day,
like the weather, which the IEC has just mentioned right now?
That's exactly what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
If it rains, a lot of people are not going to vote. It's just too difficult to go to a voting station if it rains. You can think about it, the last local government election it was. On the 3rd of August 2016, it rained in the Eastern Cape. And the Eastern Cape had the lowest voter turnout of all the provinces. Because of that, it's difficult for people, if the rivers are in spate, to get to the polls. So for the supporters of other parties, it's sometimes easier. They can take a car and go to there.
Like the voters in the Western Cape, for example, which I believe they benefited a lot from the Democratic Alliance benefited a lot from the last election simply because the weather would allow some of these voters to actually use their cars and get to some of the places they needed to vote for.
Exactly. It sounds so stupid to say the weather influences voting, but it does. And so if it's a good day, nice weather day, then we get a decent voter turnout. And then also, we don't know in this particular election because we never had an election under a pandemic before. We don't know how scared people are going to be. We don't know whether some people might stay away. We don't know those who are anti-vaxxers, whether they would think, no, I can't expose myself to possible germs like that. So that's another thing coming into this election that brings uncertainty.
It certainly is going to be an interesting one, definitely, Mari, and I'm looking forward to that. I mean, interesting with it when it comes to those that have registered to vote and also those, if we're expecting a medium voter turnout, a high voter turnout, what does it mean and what do the figures look like? I'm telling you right now, based on these figures, we're going to have a whole lot of coalition-led municipalities after
Absolutely.
the 1st of November, just based on just these. And, of course, this is not the final. The final numbers we'll get as the voting counting comes. But if you're looking at the possible scenarios that have been painted by Ipsos, certainly says that a lot of deals are going to be made there behind closed doors. Mari, we're going to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure. Mari Harris from Ipsos giving us the latest on that. On to this story.